and welcome back to Florida Foodie. I'm your host, Lisa Bell, along with our producer, Thomas Mates.
Hello.
Food insecurity and food waste are two huge issues we face here in America and around the world. And today we are joined by a man who is working on solutions to both of those problems. Dave Green is the current CEO of Feeding Children Everywhere, and he will soon be leaving that position to start a new company aimed at reducing food waste. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You have such an interesting story. You've been doing this for several years now. Born in Gainesville or raised in Gainesville and then eventually made your way to Central Florida. How do you even get started in something like this?
Yeah, so for me, it actually, I spent the early part of my career in technology and finance and had really had my own journey with hunger and poverty as a child. And so much of my professional career in my early 20s was just about kind of escaping poverty, right? And so one day I got to my late 20s and I was like, man, there's got to be more to life than this, right? So I quit my job, gave away everything I owned, and in 2008, hiked the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada. And so adventure of a lifetime, took me about 6 months. It was absolutely incredible, but I learned something about myself while I was out there, that if I was ever really going to feel content or fulfilled with my life, that my life needed to become about serving others. And whether that was in for-profit, nonprofit, government, whatever it may be, for me, it was really more about like a heart change that needed to happen, right? That it was my perspective of how I approached the world and my part and what I was supposed to do. And I realized that serving others was going to be the thing that was going to matter the most to me. And eventually that's what led me to Feeding Children Everywhere.
So that was 2008.
Yeah.
You were in your late 20s. Were you married? Do you have kids? I mean, how does someone just do that?
Yeah, so I actually had just met my wife. Okay. So we had just met right before I left. And, imagine, you're dating somebody new and you're dating for a couple of weeks and they come in one day and they're like, hey, by the way, I'm going to go hike across America, right?
After ditching my job.
Yeah,
yes,
right, exactly.
In technology, which is probably a really good job.
Right. Yeah. So she looked at me and she was like, well, hey, good for you, but I'm not going, right? And so, but, it was really cool. She was very supportive of the process while I was out there hiking, and she came out and met me a couple of times. And when I finished, we got married. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that in and of itself is fascinating. Do you work along the way? Do you save up your money to do that? How do you eat? How do you live for 6 months?
Yeah, so I had saved up a little bit of money, but, thinking back to 2008, right, and what was going on in the world at the time, I had some money in the stock market, which turns out didn't do really great in 2008. And, I'm out there and just imagine, you're in the wilderness for a couple of weeks and you get out of the wilderness, you hitchhike down to like a little country town and there's a gas station and you walk up and, it talks about like the world's largest banks on the brink of collapse. And so you're kind of wondering like what happened in the last 2 weeks, right? But ultimately, used a little bit of savings. And then actually there was a couple of strange opportunities to work like odd jobs along the way. There's a place called the Nature's Inn in Big Bear, California, where I was a little bit early in the season and there was too much snow in the Sierras. And so I ended up working there for like 10 days at this like Nature's Inn motel in Big Bear and earned a little bit extra money while I was there. But yeah, it was definitely an adventure.
And you were telling me before we got on air was that this was even just your first time hiking, and it was really the kindness of strangers that helped you out along the way.
Yeah. I had no idea what I was doing. And like most things, I'm somewhat entrepreneurial, right? So I just dive right in. And once I realized like it was something I was supposed to go do, go hiking, spend that time out there and just really do a little bit of soul searching, right? And figure out, what I was going to do with my life from there. And it was definitely, it was a heck of an adventure. And, living one day at a time every day, it was kind of a different adventure. And it was pretty exciting. Yeah.
Did you keep a journal during that time to kind of go through all of your thoughts and everything that was happening?
I did, yeah. I journaled some, I blogged some, and definitely like kind of keeping track of that was a lot of fun. That was a big part of it. And actually I met someone right before I left, and she was writing a book about, strange people in Orlando, right? And I think I qualified for that. And so basically she had interviewed me right before I left and was like, okay, I want to document like your perspective of what you think this is going to be like, right? And then when you get back, I'll interview you again. And so we had the opportunity to do that. And it was really interesting to kind of capture that of what my thoughts were about the journey before I left and then what my thoughts were when I got back and kind of compare the two. And she put it in a book. And so pretty exciting to be able to do that. But definitely, it was definitely perspective shaping to go on an adventure like that.
What surprised you the most about your two perspectives before and after?
I think just the clarity after, right, was probably the big thing of, there were so many things on the front end. I think I was a little more like wild-eyed about it, right? And, adventurous feeling. And I think on the other side of it, it was just, I think there was a lot more wisdom in it, right? Of just having gone on the adventure, and you expect things about your future, then you experience it, and then you know a lot more about, kind of the reality of things, right? And that was probably the biggest thing for me.
You just went out there with no transportation plans, no housing plans, shelter plans, and you just were going to do it.
Yeah, and you sleep outside pretty much every day, right? So you're some nights you're cowboy camping, just laying on the ground under the stars. Other nights you'd set up kind of a little basic tent. But it was absolutely incredible. I had a coyote wake me up one night while I was asleep, sniffing my ear. Right? Definitely gets your adrenaline going. At, like,
so it wasn't just like a coyote like howling. It was
like sniffing my ear. Yeah,
Yes.
that was definitely pretty exciting.
And so along that journey, how do you eat?
So everybody who hikes, like, eventually you get a trail name, right? And kind of the thing is, you can't pick your own trail name. Your trail name has to sort of pick you. It's one of those sort of fun things. But
Hobo code.
Yeah, right, exactly. My trail name became Forager because as I didn't have any idea what I was doing before I went to go out there, I very naively thought, like, well, I'll just forage for food along the way. I'll study plants. I bought this really great book of edible plants in the Western United States, and I'm like, I'll just eat plants along the way, be like super healthy. And I did that. I did that for the first couple of weeks, and then strangely,
you were hungry.
Yeah, strangely, I lost a lot of weight. Right? Yeah. And so after a couple of weeks, I shifted gears and started to kind of stock up. Then I went the other direction, which was, then you eat like a bear. So you try to get as many calories for the least amount of weight possible. So, don't try this at home, but definitely lots of candy bars and Pop-Tarts and you name it.
Dumpster diving?
No. Yeah. You didn't have time for that because you're in the wilderness basically, right?
Okay.
So you would go into a small town and you would literally just buy as much food as you could put in your backpack. That was like shelf stable food for the most part, super lightweight, high calorie stuff. And then you'd head back out and hit the trail the next morning. But it wasn't the healthiest food I've ever eaten, but when you're hiking 30 miles a day up and down mountains, you're in pretty incredible shape. So you can't really tell that you're eating that way. But
So you said you experienced food insecurity and some poverty growing up, and then you fought against that for your early career, and then kind of dove headlong back into it again by choice for fun. How I mean, was that more of like, did that remind you of things you'd experienced previously? Was it getting back to your roots in some way, or was it just just for the experience of it all?
I think I had to experience my fears, right? Like to get set free from them in a way, right? And so I was so afraid of kind of going back to poverty and going back to sort of the way that things were when I was a child, and and then like you said, choosing to literally be homeless for 6 months and hike through the wilderness and pretty much get to where you have no money, and the kindness of strangers helped me out along the way. That was a big deal of facing my fears, right? And realizing, when you wake up in the morning, like everything's still great, like everything's still okay. And, it didn't hurt to be looking out at the Sierras or, Yosemite Valley or something when you're waking up and feeling that way. But at the same time, like it was definitely a lot of growth for me of just realizing that, those fears that kind of like, I don't know, I feel like they hold all of us back in some way at different times in our lives. And I still have to be careful even now. Like, there's different times where I'll kind of let that voice of fear sort of slow me down with pursuing my dreams in life. And, I just have to put that in perspective and realize that, you just have to keep facing those challenges and keep moving forward. And yeah.
Which is what's so interesting coming from your background where you were working in technology and probably doing pretty well to then go through that experience and be compelled to go into nonprofit work where the money's not great. There's probably not a ton of job stability like you might have in the private sector. So, I mean, to me, that would be facing your fears head on once again.
Yeah, and it was really, for me, the perspective of going on the trail. I had this really good job, and imagine, your friend comes to you and says, like, yeah, I'm going to quit this job, and I'm going to go backpack across America, right, for 6 months. A lot of people I knew, including my mom, were like, are you crazy? You lost your mind? What are you doing, right? Like, it's a really good job. Why would you leave? And, what ended up happening, though, is the company that I was working for at the time, they actually went out of business while all the collapse was happening, right? They were one of the companies that were kind of swallowed up in all of the collapse in 2008. And so when I got back from hiking, literally, it was like from the time that I kind of resigned, it was about 8 months start to finish. And that company didn't even exist anymore, right? And so it taught me some perspective, too, about, there's this illusion of security, right? And, really the only real security is in like what we're doing today, right? And for me, I think that prepared me, mentally for the nonprofit world, because you're right. I mean, you're dependent on donors and kindness and, still relying on the kindness of others to be able to help fund the mission of a nonprofit organization. And that's not always consistent. So you have to keep, fighting hard for the mission of the organization every day. But I think that perspective helped me for this journey.
And then what was your first step on the journey of like devoting yourself towards service?
Really getting doors closed in my face, right? So I started just reaching out to a bunch of nonprofits, like, hey, I want to change the world, right? Like, let's do this. And they were like, oh, that's cute, and you can volunteer or something, okay? And so, really that was the part for me of realizing that probably I had more to learn first, right? It's great to start from the spot of like wanting to do good in the world, but I think I needed to learn a lot more. And so it took me a while to kind of get ready, and then I volunteered a ton, right? And volunteering a lot, I think like that's probably where I did learn the most about the nonprofit world and how this works and the needs and the causes that maybe probably I was the most passionate about. And really that's what led me to Feeding Children Everywhere, is that, as a child, like being in a family that was turned down for food assistance because my dad was an entrepreneur. He started his own mechanic shop whenever I was a young child, and he couldn't prove what his income was going to be. And so although he didn't have food to feed his family, back in that, in those days, everything was paper trail, right? It wasn't really digital. And so literally he got told no, that he couldn't get help with food. And so, that was a challenge that my family faced from a young age, and that stayed with me. And that's a cause that I'm still, very passionate about today. So
I was going to ask you about that, because that is something that I feel like I see covering food insecurity. I think that if you aren't volunteering or in it and seeing the people who are coming in need of help, you don't realize exactly how big the need is and who these people are. And many of them are working families.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the thing I've learned the most at Feeding Children Everywhere, as far as hunger here in the United States goes, is, I think, again, I probably just naively thought that hunger looked a certain way in the United States. But because of the cost of living, what I've realized, especially in communities like Central Florida, right? I mean, we have such an issue with having enough housing that is at an affordable range, right, from a rent standpoint even, and relative to wages, right? And that's actually the issue that we've seen play out at Feeding Children Everywhere. The more that we have done surveys and sat in people's living rooms and interviewed them, the people that we serve all across the United States, we find that it's, housing affordability, it's healthcare expenses, education costs, and then of course food prices have spiked tremendously over the last 50 years. Even over the last 15 years, they've had a huge increase. At the same time, household wages have gone up like 4.9% over that same period of time. And so if all of your primary expenses for a basic standard of living, are climbing at an exponential rate, and your wages are relatively flat over a time horizon, like it's only going to get worse, right? And that's who's hungry in America today, is the average person, really. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit. You volunteered a lot, but you also had an entrepreneurial background. How did you get that? Did you go to college to get some business degree? What's that background for you?
Yeah, I think I had my first product that I sold when I was like in kindergarten, right? But I think it was just wired in me, right? That I just, from the time I was really little, I wanted to be in business, and I think that it's really cool to see how even the business world has evolved over the last 40 years, right? And from the standpoint that now, before you were either a nonprofit or you're a for-profit, and those had completely different types of missions, right? But today, with the advent of the social enterprise, right, where you can have a for-profit company that's very mission-oriented as far as making an impact in the world. And so that's really what's driven me kind of in the direction I'm in now, is just this realization that you can have a for-profit company, but really make a lot of great impact in the world at the same time.
That was actually something that came out of the 2008 collapse, wasn't it? The advent of these like socially conscious for-profit organizations. Wasn't that, I believe, an initiative of the Obama administration, correct?
Yeah, and I think that really in general, sort of just a little bit of an awareness of, hey, when we have really unhealthy business practices, we can cause a serious amount of damage in the world. And I think, especially the millennials, right? I think the millennials were really responsible for the most part of the rapid growth of the social enterprise, because not only have millennials created a lot of really cool social impact organizations, but they also, with their money as consumers, they spend their money with companies that have much more of an awareness of their social impact. And so, that's been a really cool transition that I think we've all gotten to witness over the last 10 years or so, that I think will, it'll help our business community in general. I think it's put pressure on any company that doesn't really focus on their social impact. It's kind of put pressure on them to pay more attention.
So at Feeding Children Everywhere, you accomplish some amazing things. Millions of meals in the United States and beyond, touching millions of families. What are you most proud of there?
I would say the number of volunteers that we've worked with, right? So over the last, just the last 4 years, I don't know, it's probably been like 500,000 volunteers or something like that around the country, even really globally, that we've worked with. And the volunteers that I have the chance to work with, I mean, they're some of the greatest people on the planet, right? Where I'm so humbled when I get around them. And, there's people, like, I think back to when we did the big project for Hurricane Maria relief, right? Where we packaged 4.4 million hurricane relief boxes for Maria at the convention center here in Central Florida. We did that over like 19 days. There was over 54,000 volunteers that turned out over that period of time to package those boxes. But about 3 days in, the team had kind of pulled me aside and they let me know about this husband and wife that were there. And they had been evacuated from Puerto Rico because the wife had a medical issue, a medical emergency, and they'd been evacuated. So because they were here, though, they felt like sort of this like helplessness that they wanted to help all their friends and family back home. And so they came out every day, right?
Wow.
And they literally all 19 days were there packaging boxes of food for people in Puerto Rico. And when I talked to Ernie, the husband, he looked at me, he said, you know what? He's like, for as many days as it takes, he's like, we'll be here. He's like, we won't leave until the job is done. And like, he was there. And like people like that spirit of just, wanting to help their neighbors, right? Like, oh my gosh, like it's so amazing. And, what a better world we'd be if we were all like Ernie, right?
And
Just
it keeps you motivated, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It challenges me personally even, right?
The other thing that's interesting, though, is Feeding Children Everywhere is not that old. So, I mean, it started in Central Florida, and in a relatively short period of time has had a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think that trying to, as a nonprofit, like most nonprofits, just about every nonprofit starts out with a very pure cause, right? That they're trying to make a difference in. And what happens is, as you grow a little bit, I think that the tendency is like, you have to have efficiency as like a business too, right? And I think that the risk is for nonprofits is they sort of lose sight a little bit of the cause that they really started out, passionate about. And I would say the thing at Feeding Children Everywhere that I think has really led to the growth that we've had is just staying impact focused, right? Where we constantly remember to, in our staff meetings and our everything that we do and we communicate, and our philosophy of how we respond is just remembering that the people we serve are the reason that we're all here. And I think that's what's really driven us to kind of stay authentic to our original purpose and has caused a lot of that growth.
So when it was recently announced that you were leaving Feeding Children Everywhere after being the CEO for 4 years, I think it was a surprise for a lot of people who didn't know you very well. Why are you leaving, and what's next? Yeah,
and it was a really emotional decision for me too, right? And it's easy to hold on for too long, right? I think sports is probably the easiest analogy of, we've all seen athletes before that had, really good careers in a specific sport, and when they stay that one extra year that they probably should have like called it quits the year before, things can kind of get dysfunctional. Like it's just not the same. And trying to have the awareness awareness about myself of like, with my skill set, my personality, like I think there's a window with something where like I'm at my best, and then beyond that, I think there's people with other personality types that would do a better job from there, right? And so for me at Feeding Children Everywhere, it was kind of that, right? Of just this realization of like, you know what, we have made a huge impact and we've been able to build something really special. And, you know, I'm more that hair on fire visionary type, right? And eventually that gets exhausting for people around me, right? And so I think like bringing somebody in that has some really good nonprofit experience nationally that can kind of take things to the next level, like that would be, you know, my biggest dream, to see the organization grow into even more and do even more in the future to make even more impact. So that's what I'm really trying to help make happen in my transition here. And then for me, it gives me an opportunity to go pursue that next big idea, right? And I think that really that's it, is the consumer, you know, people just need, there's so many people want to do good in the world, right? And I feel like if we, as a society, if we do a better job and we create more tools that give people the opportunity to do good in the world, people will just do it. Like they will definitely do it.
Don't you feel like the challenge, though, can be reaching people? I mean, I totally agree that people want to do good, but if you create a set of tools on how you can do it, sometimes it's hard to get that message across.
Oh yeah, that's definitely, that's where the magic is at, right? So, and thankfully, in the digital age, right, that certainly helps to amplify our messages, right, and to get stories out, and to be able to find people who have an affinity for certain things, right? There's a lot of that work, thankfully, is already done online, right? And so, you know, one of the things I will say, there was just the story when I made the announcement even about the transition, it was really encouraging. I had people reaching out from all over the world, literally all over the world, reaching out, scientists and professors and PhDs, and just, you know, people passionate about sustainability and eliminating food waste from all over the world, encouraging me to kind of like, this is it, we need this, please keep going, right? And so that definitely helped.
Just so we're clear for our listeners, you're going from Feeding Children Everywhere, which is pretty self-explanatory, to now trying to prevent food waste, because we do waste. I think it's 40% of our food ends up in the landfill. And you have seen firsthand the impact that all of that food could have on people. Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, I've seen the wins and the losses of food waste too, right, along this journey, where we'll meet with a food manufacturer who has, you know, 8 truckloads of food in their warehouses, and they decide to donate it to us, but it's been sitting there for so long that 5 truckloads just have to get thrown in the trash, right? Because they're just bad, right? It's not something that you can serve at that point, just because of supply chain issues, and it sat on a warehouse, you know, warehouse shelf, and the only reason why they finally got rid of it is because they needed more space for other stuff, right? And there's so many times like that, whether it's, you know, unfortunately, you know, food that's produced at farms, it's sort of unpredictable, right? When you think of, if you have a factory that is producing, you know, phone cases, let's say, if you decide to make 1 million, you know, you fire up the factory machines and you make 1 million cases. You know, if you're growing beans, that doesn't work the same way, right? So if you have a customer that commits to buying a certain amount of pounds of beans, you can't grow the exact amount of pounds of beans, right? Otherwise, what happens if there's not enough rain or not enough sun, or it's a little bit light of a growing season, it means you're going to fail your customer, right? And you might lose that customer. So farms have to overproduce the amount of food that they really need. And then what happens with that, right? What happens with that overproduction? And there just needs to be more efficient tools to help connect the food that's available, whether it's in a grocery store or from a restaurant or consumer packaged goods companies, farms, to be able to connect that food with the people who need it.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. So you've talked about an app that would be a tool essentially to like alert people to these surpluses or the availability of food that might go to waste otherwise. So how you talked about supply chain issues. I know obviously you don't have your final product yet, but what's the vision? How do you connect everyone with these people, and how do you make it accessible?
Yeah.
Is there a sort of a flow chart or a thought process on how that's going to happen, or is that just what? Or do you just have the big picture at this point?
Well, there's 5 key areas of food waste, right? So you have the farm level, you have the consumer packaged goods level, you have the grocery store, the restaurant, and then what happens in our homes, right? So I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it's always, you know, a guess of you put the chicken nuggets on the table, and you're not sure if they're going to eat 1 or 5, or if the dog's going to end up eating them because they throw them in to the dog, right? You know, you're not really sure, right? And so, you know, consumer food waste even is a thing to consider, right? But starting with the food waste that happens at the grocery store level is really where I'm going to begin. And, it's the most actionable for the consumer, because if you shop at a grocery store, then you're already there. You're already going to spend money on food. And so by using data and technology to help the consumer be more aware of the foods that they should buy while they're in the store to help reduce food waste, right? So what if you just knew, like, all right, well, I know I'm going to buy this certain type of vegetable or some type of vegetable for this salad that I'm making. If you could have really at your fingertips information that would say, hey, you're helping eliminate food from landfills and reducing, the effects of climate change. If you buy these avocados right now, I think people just having that information, like, people would want to, like, they would want to do good in the world. And the avocados are still great right now. You're going to have the salad tonight, so it'll work.
Yeah. And so is some of that also working with grocery stores as well? Because some of their practices are not the best for sustaining their produce and things of that nature, and keeping them fresh on the shelves. It's sometimes more about, like, presentation than actually
what
selling
is the
it.
reception? Because I feel like a lot of customers will go in, and we see that all the time with produce, especially if something doesn't look absolutely pristine, it ends up in the trash.
Yep. And that is so true. And I think, long-term adjustments in consumer behavior will definitely be a part of this. And they're already, actually, there was just a huge announcement. There's a company that does, doorstep delivery, basically, of produce, right? And it's produce that's the odd shaped and, maybe a little blemished or whatever it may be, but you can do a subscription service and have it delivered right to your front door. And I'd say millennials, again, are a big piece of, making
is there a
things
cost
like that.
savings associated with that? Because I feel like that's going to be the key to getting people to buy into it.
Definitely, like the door delivery of that produce. I mean, there's a social impact, and it is below market rates on the produce, and so that's pretty helpful. But when you think of the consumer packaged goods items, it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with it, right? So there may still be 2 weeks left on a product that is on the store shelf, and unfortunately, what happens in the grocery stores is there's kind of a ticking clock on that if it doesn't come off the shelf. And before the product actually reaches the expiration, most grocery stores actually take that product off of the shelves, and then a large percentage of that ends up going into landfills because, when you think of the food banks, they only have so many trucks and they can only pick up from so many grocery stores in one day. And it's just not logistically possible to pick up all of the food from all of the grocery stores in all of Florida in a day, right? It's just not possible. And so what happens is it sits there for a period of time. Eventually, maybe the food bank comes and gets it. By the time it gets to the food bank, they've just got to throw it in the trash.
Is there a liability factor in that too? I've heard in the past that some businesses are reluctant to maybe donate because there could be something wrong with the food.
Yeah, so on donated food, there's actually a federal law that protects companies from being sued from donating food. Kind of the asterisk there is that it has to be reasonable, right? So if they saw something that they were like, I'm pretty sure that's spoiled, or they didn't do something
that's been on the shelf for 30 years.
Right? Then they could still be liable, right? But if it's just food on a shelf that is nearing expiration or just past a best by date, right? But doesn't mean that there's something wrong from a food safety standpoint. By all means, they're protected by the law.
So this new suite of tools that you are working to develop right now, I imagine you have a team of people that you're working with and investors.
Right. Yeah.
Are you primarily focused on the consumer, the individual, or are you trying to also help with that chain with the farms and the manufacturers and the whole 5 levels that you mentioned?
So without giving away too much, it's definitely starting with the consumer because I feel like too many times we start with the idea of what's going to happen in the factory, but if the consumer hasn't already adopted that or isn't ready to do that, then that's a lot of wasted time and energy and resources. But when you get the consumer to participate, when people are participating and you're sort of building this the way that people want it built, then you go back to the farms, and now you have this powerful tool, right, that you can deploy through farms, that you can deploy through grocery stores, through restaurants, that just a passionate, group of people all across the United States that want to reduce the effects of climate change, that want to reduce food waste, and want to see more people with the food they need for their bellies.
With healthier food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got 6 months left or so with Feeding Children Everywhere before you're officially on this new venture full time. Is there any more room for innovation with Feeding Children Everywhere in that time, or are you just sort of trying to stay the course until they find a replacement, or what's your plan?
You know, it's a little bit of both. It's some balance for me, right? So definitely staying the course, but at the same time, because we have some really great things in motion, there's a lot of momentum. You know, there are still some opportunities within kind of the existing framework that we have, and so definitely I'd like to get all those to like the best point possible, so that when we do bring on a new CEO, that we're turning things over in a really great spot with a lot of momentum. So yeah, there's still a lot more work to be done even in the next 4 to 6 months. Yeah.
How do you juggle doing all this? I mean, you're full-time CEO, developing this new suite of tools to try and reduce food waste, married with 2 young kids.
Yeah.
How do you juggle it all?
You know, I think maybe it's the ADHD has a lot of maybe negative side effects, but I think there's some good ones too, right? And you know, I think I'm able to move between things pretty quickly, and it's all things that I'm passionate about, right? And so you know, it never feels like work for me, right? Like whether it's at 5 a.m. when I'm finished meditating and I'm thinking about, you know, the next ideas for Feeding Children Everywhere, or if it's, you know, 11 o'clock at night and I'm having an idea about food waste, right? That I think it's all just a lifestyle, and when you live a certain lifestyle, then, you know, it's just who you are, and so it doesn't feel like work, and it's all just part of the same thing.
Do you ever get discouraged?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I fail constantly, right? And so, and it's funny because I talk to a lot of people about failure, and I often hear my own words, right, when I'm discouraged, and I'm like, why did I have to go tell everybody like fail and then fail again and fail again? I'm like, here I am failing again, right? Listening to my own words, right? But, you know, and I do get discouraged sometimes, right? But I try to really quickly, I've tried to develop a habit of when I do feel discouraged, of just like owning that real quick and then moving on, because I realize like these little discouragements that we have throughout our day, that, you know, it's kind of like picking up this cup right here, right? That's not hard to pick up, but if you keep picking up more and more cups all day long, there's little discouragements, and then you're trying to walk around with 100 cups in your arms, that's impossible, right? It gets too heavy to carry.
Yeah, I mean, especially I think for someone like you who has such a great vision, and then when you try to sell that vision to other people who you might need their help to make it all happen, and they might not be on board with you.
Yeah.
That's got to be hard.
Yeah, and I think in the early days, like I would get mad, right? I would be like, I can't believe, like I told them like we were going to change the world, and like why didn't they get excited?
Who doesn't want to change the world?
Come on. And so, but over time, what I realized was that like everybody has their own causes that they're passionate about, right? And for some people, it's, you know, trying to eliminate food waste. For others, it's trying to end childhood hunger. But there's a lot of causes that really need attention from people, right? And whether that's causes around animals or political or, you know, socioeconomic, whatever it may be. And so that's kind of the thing that I've realized is, you know, don't get my feelings hurt if somebody's not as passionate as I am about something, but because it just means that they have their own causes that they're interested in.
So do you have a time frame for when you plan on rolling out this new technology that people can access in some way?
Yeah, so the big thing right now is I definitely don't want it to become a distraction. I want to finish strong at Feeding Children Everywhere. And so I'm getting ready to celebrate my 10-year anniversary with my wife. And so we're actually taking a little trip for a few weeks and bringing the girls with us. And so, you know, when I get back, I think we'll be at the point where we're starting to get some candidates for the new CEO at Feeding Children Everywhere. And once we get a little bit closer to that, then I'll go ahead and pick a rollout date for the new app and the new company. But you know, trying to stay focused as close to 100% as I can for now on Feeding Children Everywhere. And
is your goal to start with the new app and the new rollout locally, try and implement something here in Central Florida, and then roll it out nationwide?
It'll start nationwide.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll start nationwide, and you know, and there'll be a beta, right? There'll be a version of it. It's the beta, and basically because you want people to be able to sort of break it all over the country, where certain things in Central Florida it may work perfect for, and then we find out that there's grocery store chains, let's say in Wyoming, where they're set up a certain way and the app doesn't work the right way there, right, because of it. And so, you know, rolling it out nationally, giving people a chance to test it and break it and refine it, and then with people's feedback, then, you know, kind of keep retooling the app until it's dialed in right, you know, exactly the way people want it nationwide. And with a nationwide focus, you know, it's all about reducing pounds of food waste, right? And so with a nationwide focus, that's where we'll be able to have the biggest impact. And then, you know, hopefully then then eventually I think there's plenty of other countries that we could roll the app out in and make an impact there as well.
So where do you hope to see yourself in 10 years?
Oh man, 10 years from now. Wow. Ask me about 10 days maybe.
10 months.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, wow, I feel so blessed and fortunate just to still be, around in 10 years and addressing social issues and trying to make impact. And gosh, I think in my girls would be 12 and 16 then, right? So I'll probably
panicking.
My hair will it'll all be white then. I think by then for sure it'll be totally white. And so if I still have hair left by then, so but yeah, I mean honestly, I don't see myself doing anything that's not impact related in my life. I mean, I'm definitely no matter how many companies I have the opportunity to start or grow or build or sell, I'll stay impact focused on what I'm doing.
And where can people follow along with you and stay on top of what you're doing and watch for that beta and that rollout and everything?
So I have a website that somebody created for me that is very helpful, and it's just davegreenactivist.com. And through that website, people can stay connected on. And we'll post a link to this on there as well. But people can stay connected to kind of the things that I'm working on. And then, of course, all the normal social media channels, Instagram and whatnot. I'm usually pretty active on Instagram, but yeah.
You mentioned a lot about, your childhood growing up, fears, confronting those fears, and this whole illusion of security. I feel like that's something that so many people can relate to. And I imagine in your experience, you've encountered a lot of people who've had similar childhoods, and maybe that's why they're now volunteering. What do you try and tell people when they think, oh, there's no way I could ever do something like what you're doing because I've got a wife with 2 kids and this stable job? What do you say to those people?
Yeah. Well, there was a saying on the Pacific Crest Trail, actually, that everybody hikes their own mountain. And really what that means is like, for me, I had this specific journey, right? So for me, it was feeding children everywhere and fighting hunger and going down this pathway that I'm on. But for somebody else who they have a job in accounting and they can't leave their job and they are at a certain point in their family life where they need some more stability, they still have their own mountain too, right? And so they just have to find within the framework of their current context of their life, what's their mountain that they can go climb, right? What's their path to go make the world a better place or make impact. Some people do it with their giving, right? I mean, today's Giving Tuesday. Some people just don't have quite the same amount of time, but they have the heart to help. And so they have causes they're passionate about and they give on days like Giving Tuesday, right? And, for others, it is making the time to volunteer or getting their kids involved in volunteerism and teaching their kids about those causes, right? But everybody's got their own mountain to hike.
And meditating every morning helps maintain that clarity.
Yeah, for me, that morning meditation is really critical. So I don't sleep much, and so it helps to be able to do that. But usually, at least an hour a day, sometimes a couple hours a day. But that's a really important start to my day.
Well, Dave Green, thank you so much. We wish you the very best in your future endeavors. Please come back when you've rolled it out nationwide, and we'd love to hear more about it.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Florida Foodie. We'd also like to thank our guest, Dave Green from Feeding Children Everywhere. You can learn more about that organization at feedingchildreneverywhere.com. You can also follow Dave Green on his website, davegreenactivist.com, and on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to follow Lisa Bell as well. Search Lisa Bell News on Facebook and Instagram, or Lisa Bell News 6 on Twitter. You can also find her children's books online, normangnomebooks.com, and by searching Norman Gnome Books on Facebook and Instagram. A big thank you to our technical producers, Derek Mosier and Ryan Hawley. I'm the show's producer, Thomas Mates. Florida Foodie is available to download wherever you get your podcasts. Please take the time to rate and review us as well. And you can find videos of all of our podcasts on clickorlando.com/podcasts.